Hi, everybody. Welcome to my session on teaching English language learners. My name's Larry Ferlazzo, and I am a high school teacher in Sacramento, California. This session is going to basically follow the outline of an article Katie Hull and I have written for the American Educator, the Journal of the American Federation of Teachers, and it will appear in the summer 2018 issue. It's going to cover three key elements of what we think are important to ELL instruction: differentiation, student motivation, and affirming error correction. Before we get to those points, though, I'd like to point out two key things that undergird my kind of instruction to ELLs. One, it's critical to look at ELLs through the lens of assets and not deficits. Our ELLs are as smart as any other student in our class. They just don't have the English proficiency. They have many, many assets. Researchers have found that ELLs tend to have a very strong growth mindset because what they're learning in one period, in one class, they can apply immediately the next period based on the English that they're learning. So they see immediate growth. Researchers have also found that ELLs tend to be particularly creative because of their exposure to multicultural experiences. And finally, researchers have also found that ELLs, as most of our students, have a strong sense of perseverance. And the challenge that we have is just to encourage them to apply that to academic endeavors. The second key point that undergirds my perspective on teaching ELLs is that good teaching for ELLs is good for everyone. The strategies that I'll be talking about in this session I use in my ELL classes, but I also use in all of my other classes, including my International Baccalaureate philosophy classes. So the first thing we'll cover is differentiating instruction. One thing to keep in mind is this old adage, being equal does not necessarily mean being fair. All of our students have their own gifts, and unique challenges. We want to keep that in mind as we bring this differentiation mindset to bear in our classes every day. One simple way to differentiate instruction is the point of wait time. Researchers have found that the typical American instructor provides 1 second of wait time between when they ask a question to when they ask students to respond to it. Researchers have also found that if you add 3 to 5 seconds to that time to give students a period to reflect about their responses, that the higher level thinking and overall quality of the answers dramatically increases. Often what I'll do is tell students, I'm going to ask you to wait a few seconds after I ask this question. I don't want anybody to shout out the answer. I want you to think about it. Then I'll oftentimes ask students to share with a partner. And then only after that will I ask students to share their responses individually to the whole class. It's important to, in my experience, to also encourage students to adapt their initial answer, their initial thought. The Common Core standards encourage the idea of collaboration, which is students doing individual work, sharing it with others, getting feedback, and revising their work. So this kind of wait time can be used to support that kind of collaboration. Non-linguistic clues, gestures, pictures, graphic organizers. Those also are simple ways to differentiate instruction. Word walls are great. This is an example that Valentina Gonzalez has created. I don't know about your word walls, but oftentimes mine have been just sort of splattering the words up there. But for ELLs in particular, showing the words in categories with images, and it's not a question of having to have teachers do all the drawing. I have students draw them. And having them accessible for students during class time can enhance comprehension. Preview, view, and review is a long time instructional strategy used in bilingual classes. That's where the lesson is first presented in the home language of the student, then the lesson itself is conducted in English, then reviewed again in the home language. Obviously, that's problematic in a class where you don't necessarily teach students who all speak the same second language, or where a teacher doesn't speak the second language. But it can be modified as a great strategy for building and activating prior knowledge. For example, there are tons of textbook chapter summaries online, freely available, and I'll share links to them in multiple languages and multiple subjects. So if I'm going to be teaching in my ELD U.S. History class, World War II, even though it's a different textbook, it covers the basic stuff. It's easy for me to just print out a summary chapter from a different textbook of World War II in the student's home language, whether it's Hmong, Vietnamese, Arabic, Farsi, and give it to them a few days ahead of time to read. It really has a dramatic impact on their prior knowledge, as well as in terms of relationship building. They see that I'm going the extra mile to try to help them out. Brain pop videos, which unfortunately schools have to pay for, or teachers have to pay for, are also great for Spanish language. I've had students watch them at home for homework, the Spanish versions of topics that we're going to be covering in the next week, and whether it's in English, social studies, geography. I've also had math and science teachers use it the same way. Those videos are in Spanish. Khan Academy for math teachers, those videos are also in Spanish. Same text, different Lexile levels. So again, there are many sites online where there are literally tens of thousands of different versions of the same article based on Lexile levels. Lexile means text complexity. So you'll find articles, whether it's in News and Levels or Newsla, many different sites, where you can pick an article that for one level could be for English proficient students, another level for intermediate ELLs, another level for beginners. And in fact, Rewordify is an online tool that allows you to simplify whatever text you want to copy and paste into it. And it does a surprisingly good job. Again, there's a link that I'll share where you can access these sites. Cooperative, collaborative learning. I shared earlier about this idea of collaboration. And related to ELLs, a simple way is to just have a ELL buddy, someone who's more proficient in the language to help out the student who isn't. In a mainstream classroom, the student doesn't have to speak the home language of that student, they just want to help. And I've found that to be very helpful, as well as students have found it to be very useful. Jigsaws are a great way to use collaborative learning. Jigsaws are the idea of whether students read different sections of a text and then present it to the class. Easy to do that by having ELLs present the smaller amount of the text or an easier portion of it, Or it could be done on biographies. You're going to do a biography about Abraham Lincoln. One group has to develop the challenges that he faced, whereas a ELL, lower intermediate ELL students can do a presentation on his personal life, when he was born, when he died, and his family. So lots of ways to use Jigsaw. John Hattie, sort of the education data guru, speaks very highly of Jigsaw and says that it sort of meets all the highest levels of thinking and instruction. Sentence starters, right? I mean, that's a pretty important go-to for most ELL teachers. Just having these up on the board for students to be able to use. Writing frames. Writing frames are basically expanded sentence starters to help students write paragraphs or essays. Here's an example using the ABC outline, answering the question, back it up with evidence, make a comment and connection. Another writing frame, this one using they say, I say, why I say it structure. And then there are writing structures. So writing frames are basically fill in the blank. Writing structures are outlines that just tell you what should go there, whether it's a hook, as it says here, the problem or the thesis, the solution. It doesn't, you have to create the sentence, but it just tells you what goes there. And again, that's a simple way to differentiate instruction by having less proficient ELLs use writing frames and more proficient ELLs using writing structures. And then differentiated grading. Of course, that's a big issue for lots of teachers. I know for high schools, the civil rights guidelines from the U.S. Department of Education require high schools to enable students who enter as ninth grade ELL beginners to be able to graduate in 4 years and be ready to enter college. So I don't know how you do that without differentiated grading and differentiated instruction. The states and districts that I have found that provide specific guidelines for differentiated instruction, which do not include our district or our state of California, basically make it very clear that teachers have to make all content and all assessment accessible to ELLs. That's the theory. In reality, for many of our teachers, whether they don't have the time, or they don't have the ability, or the knowledge, where we not able to make that kind of content and assessment accessible, we encourage teachers to be flexible. I know in our district just recently, we've been able to make a comment saying to be flexible in the grading, just make a content saying language modifications are made. Other strategies to keep in mind: teacher talk, rate of speed, right? Don't talk too fast. Talk slow. Easy to change the video rate of speed by clicking on the gearbox on YouTube videos. Turning on closed caption videos. Provide verbal and written instructions. Check for understanding beyond. Does everybody understand? Lots of models. Pre-teaching academic vocabulary and having peer tutors. We have lots of peer tutors in our school. They get credit. It's basically instead of teacher assistants. And again, they don't have to speak the home language of our ELL students. Here's an example of pre-teaching academic vocabulary, a word chart, where they write the meaning, related words in a picture. Students can also write the meaning in their home language. And here are some links to some of the resources I mentioned, but I'll provide one link near the end to get to all of them. And we're not going to take time for this, but this is some reflection, questions to be thinking about, not just during this section, but other sections as well. What are one or two ideas that you can relate to your classroom? Second point, encouraging intrinsic motivation for academic achievement. There's a concept called self-determination theory that researchers have used to identify the key points necessary to encourage intrinsic motivation. One of the key points is autonomy. Do students have some control over the process that they are using to learn and what they are learning? Three types of choice enter into this. One is organizational choice. Where do you want to sit? Who do you want to be in a group with? Second is procedural choice. Okay, here are two essay prompts. You pick one to respond to. What researchers have found to be the choice that really generates the most intrinsic motivation is called cognitive choice. So if I give students a text to read, we've reviewed lots of different reading strategies. You decide which one would help you the most. What homework, what do you want to study? What do you think you need the most help in, the most practice in? You figure out what the homework is. So that's the idea of cognitive choice. Competence. Students need to feel like they are capable of doing the work. Okay, one way to encourage that is having online practice. There's lots of online tools where only they and the computer know they made mistakes. The importance of growth mindset. And growth mindset, the idea is praising effort, but it's beyond that. It's also praising the strategies that people are using. And one thing to keep in mind is researchers suggest that the feedback ratio should be 3 or 5 to 1. So 3 or 5 positive interactions to 1 not so positive interaction. Relatedness. This is another important part of self-determination theory. Does this work bring me in relationship with others who I like and respect, whether they be classmates or teachers? That's why it's important for teachers to get to know students. I know one of my ELL students wants to be a doctor, and every week she's developed a plan of things she wants to accomplish this week to further her on that. And we review that at the end of each week. Relevance is what I am going to be learning today, connected to my hopes, interests, goals, and dreams. Okay, so we want to, again, be aware of students' interests. We want to have strong relationships. And that example of the doctor is a perfect example. Here's some other online resources related to student motivation. Some other thoughts, reflection, take a minute. Are there some ideas related to motivation that you might be able to apply to your own classroom? Take a few seconds for you to think about. The last part to keep in mind is the idea of using affirming forms of error correction. We always make mistakes. I am a learner of the Spanish language. I make zillions of mistakes. And we want to encourage students to look at mistakes as opportunities. One way that I do that is I encourage students to make a list of all the English mistakes that they can remember over the past month that they made. Make a list of that. And next to it, they write what they learned from each one. And then we talk about, well, look at all these things that you learned out of the mistakes. If you hadn't made the mistakes, you wouldn't have learned them. For individual feedback, the idea of pointing, that students have written an essay, I will point to where an error is and then challenge students to figure out how to correct it. Linguists make a big deal about the difference between errors and mistakes. And really one of them, and I can't remember which one it is, one of them is where students have been taught what to do correctly, but they made a mistake. They didn't do it. The other one is they made a mistake, but they never learned it. They had no idea it was a mistake. So I don't think we have to deal with which one's an error and which one's a mistake, but just recognize when we're teaching. Obviously, if students haven't been taught what the correct way to deal with this mistake is, pointing is not going to work. It's only going to work if they know what the correct one is. Only target one or two mistakes. In an essay, you don't want to mark a zillion. And again, online practice is a perfect tool for encouraging students to improve on their errors. Concept attainment is also, it's one of my favorite ways to deal with error correction. I'll talk about that in a second. And of course, games are also fun. Just write a bunch of mistakes on the board and have small groups try to figure out and compete, who can correct the most. But concept attainment is great. The idea of inductive learning. Here's an example of using it to help students learn what's a good claim and what isn't. You basically just put a bunch of good examples under yes and not so good examples under no, and slowly uncover them and have students determine what the concept is. Why are these yes? Why are these no? And you can do that for has and have, verb tense, claims, essays, lots of different things. Here are some other online resources. Again, an opportunity to take a few moments to reflect. What can you apply in your classroom related to error correction that we talked about today? This is the link that you can find all the resources that have been discussed in this presentation. So I'll give you a moment to take a screenshot of that. And now we're going to end with a video of students sharing their comments about what has helped and what hasn't helped so much related to differentiated instruction, motivation, error correction. This is an edited version of student panels that I organize as part of our own professional development at our school. So let's listen and watch.
Those students don't know English that well and have English as their secondary language. One of the things that they could do is use body language or showing action. So that way they could make them understand.
Like, we should be friends, right?
Another way that the teacher do to help student understanding is that sometimes the teacher allow the student to use the Google Translate and dictionary, which give the student a clear and explain meaning of those words and phrases that they don't understand. This also helps students to get a better understanding of how to use those words in the sentences and know the meaning behind of those words in the context.
For another way, the teacher may explain the word by using some basic and easy word. For example, if the teacher want to explain what curiosity means, they might say interested at or want to know something.
So now we're going to talk about the things that teachers should avoid doing in order to help the student understand or learn English. And one of the things are letting the student to use translator all the time. And instead of using translator, they could use dictionary, or teachers can explain the word for them using basic words. And that way it's easier for them to know the word better and use it in the context. And instead of translating it for one language to another language, and they have to memorize it too. And that way it's harder for them to remember.
Another way that the teacher do that doesn't help student learning or make it harder for student to learn is that sometimes the teacher assign the student to work with people who are not willing to help them. This may make those students to feel even more uncomfortable because they may feel like they don't they are not being supported by their partner or even their teacher.
Moreover, I found that when the teacher assigns students to sit next to the one who speak the same language, it's not helpful even though they can help each other or say opinion. But sometimes it doesn't helpful because those students use their own language instead of using English. And sometimes those students don't focus on tasks and they're just talking with each other.
We're going to talk about what the teachers do to motivate us. The action that my teachers have taken to motivate me is when they give us the instruction and they explain how to do the worksheet, and then as always Mr. Falata told us it's okay to make mistakes.
And experience, some things that motivate me, it's like when the teachers, so we are learning English and then we are learning a subject at the same time. And that's really difficult for us because we don't understand some words, and I feel so motivated and I feel so good when the teachers take the time to teach us the words that are unfamiliar for us. And I feel, and now I feel so proud of us because we are here, you know. And when we came to this country, I only knew how to say hi, and now I'm sitting here with you and talking with English with you, and it's like.
For me, the difference between the teacher in the high school and the teacher in the college is the teacher in the high school, they care about their student, and in the college we don't have much that opportunity because we are still the English learner. So if the teacher in the high school don't motivate the student in the high school, so they might not be able to be in the college.
The teachers motivated me when they speak to me in English. I feel comfortable because I think that I can talk with them without a problem. When they speak to me in English, I feel that I'm learning very fast. And I have one teacher that motivated me every day, telling me that I am very smart and I can do all things. Learning English, I will do mistakes, but I will learn from my mistakes.
Do to not motivate us for me is when they gives us the worksheet but they don't explain very well, but it's hard for me to understand it.
Okay, but I don't feel motivated with the teachers. So I have AB classes, and then I have to present and I have to do things, and I feel so frustrated when they just told me, oh, you have 10 minutes to do this, and sometimes I don't even know how to do it, and they don't explain me and they don't take the time to tell me, okay.
So for me, the time when I don't feel the teacher motivate me is when the teacher only focus some special student, or they pay less attention or even ignore the other students who are not good at in English. And sometimes the teacher tired of explaining word for students to understand, and they don't care about those students.
The teachers do not motivate me when they speak really fast. They are like, and I'm like, what do you say? And sometimes they don't try to the students understand what they want to say. And when they use hard words in English that we are not learning yet, and they use really hard words, and I don't feel motivated when teachers don't take the time for explaining you what you have to do step by step. And I don't feel motivated when teachers talk to me in Spanish because sometimes they think that I can learn English.
Sometimes I feel motivated when a teacher asks me something, a question, so I don't say nothing, but it's not because I don't want to say the answer or simple, it's because I don't understand the question or a specific word, you know? So
how teachers improve our English when we make mistakes. And one of the ways that I feel like teachers help me when I make mistakes is that whenever I do something wrong, instead of just making me feel like I did something wrong, they make me feel like I can do better. Instead of just like saying, oh, you don't say this, or you don't say that. They'd be like, oh, you can replace these words with other words. Instead of using this, you can use that. You know what I mean? Like, they just don't feel like I make an error. They make me feel like I can do something better.
When I make mistakes, teachers say to me, like, you can do it. Don't feel bad for making mistakes. Like, you can do it the first time, but you need to practice more, and the next time you can do it. Or like, one of my teachers is like me. Like, she came to the USA when she was young, and she told me, like, don't feel bad when you make mistakes, or like when I don't want to talk English because I think people will make fun of me. She say, like, don't care about other people, care about yourself. You can do it.
The way the teacher do when I make mistake or I am wrong, that's some pronunciation of a word. They tell me try again, and that's normal because I am.
So now, on the contrary of that, when teachers make us feel like we actually did something wrong, for me is when they make me feel like I'm dumb, like I'm not good enough to do something or say something. When they be like, oh, just let it go. They don't actually push me. They don't actually push me, and I can't push myself if they don't push me. You know what I mean? They don't understand how I want my motivation, how I want to grow in my English, and they don't motivate me to do that.
So I've been very lucky so far that all my teachers actually care and help me to improve my English. But I feel like a teacher that wouldn't care, just be like, have the lesson for the day and just be over with. And at the end of the day, he would just be the same. I'm not trying to, even like go to you and say, oh, okay, are you understanding what we're talking about or something? He would just finish with the lesson and he'd say it's done or something like that.